going on in Chicago in 1896. It was, no, it wasn't a fire, but that's a good guess. It was the first World's Fair, World's Exposition. The World's Exposition of 1896 in Chicago. And that was one of his destinations. You know, I guess he just picked up the newspaper wherever he was, and whatever sounded interesting, he just head that way or whatever. I don't know. But it's interesting to read his bio, because one of the things he commented on is that he was very struck by something that they were, this scientific thing they did at the World's Fair in Chicago. And it was the first time that any human being had seen an entire city lit up electrically. Now, think about it. Up until then, it was candles, campfires, and kerosene. And now, electricity was going to light up a whole city. And they were showing this as the thing of the future. It must have been a shock to people who were looking at it. I mean, for all of human recorded history, this wasn't possible until that moment when they were showing it off. So that must have struck him, because when he got through with all his travels, he decided Chicago would be the place to start a law practice. And that's what he did. He moved to Chicago. But like some of you who were shaking your heads a while ago in acknowledgement, it's the first time in his life that he felt completely alone in an ocean of humanity. Because in Chicago in 1900, there were already over 1 million people there. In 1900. And he didn't know any of them. And he was trying to start a new business from scratch as an attorney. And a lot of people may think that starting a professional practice, whether it's a dentist or it's an attorney or whatever, is quite easy to do. But just because you hang out your sign doesn't mean that everybody's beating the path of your door, right? There's a lot that goes on. So as he got started, he was really struggling to make friends. After a year or two, he decided he would invite those people he had come to know to come to his office, and he came upon a plan to solve this problem of friendship and fellowship. And he invited 3 gentlemen to come to his office, and he asked them, would you be willing to come every week to my office just for the sake of fellowship at a pre-appointed time and set an appointment to just get together and see what we could do together to resolve our need to connect with other humans? And they said, that's fine, but one of them, a guy named Hiram Shorey, said, if we make one edit to that, I'm in. He said, let's, just to be fair, instead of meeting at your office every week, let's meet at each one's office. We'll just move it around, rotate it around. After a while, they got to where they were inviting others. And suddenly it got pretty large in a hurry. Other people kind of latched onto this idea. And when they would come as guests, similar to some of you tonight, they said, what do you call your group, your little group? And they got to thinking about it, and they said, well, let's see. We're rotating our meetings between offices. Let's call it Rotary. We're the Rotary Club of Chicago. And that's how I got started. Isn't that amazing? What boggles my mind about that, folks, is that when Marilyn and I moved to Waxahachie from Arlington a little over 25 years ago, we didn't know how to get integrated into the community either. And we felt kind of like strangers. But we had an opportunity early on to be introduced to a group that said, let's start a supper club. And they were all newcomers. So we decided to do that. We were going to start this supper club. We couldn't keep that thing going for a year. We were only meeting once a month. So I got to wondering, as we were beginning to be trained to be district governor, how is it possible that such a simple, unadorned reason to meet once a week, rotating between offices, became 1.2 million Rotarians in 170 countries, and 33,000 Rotary clubs meet every week, just like those guys did 105 years ago, somewhere in the world. Either mornings, evenings, at noon, somewhere on the planet they're meeting. I mean, it just boggled my mind. So I began thinking about it quite a bit as we were training for this job this year, and I've come up with an answer that I'd like to share with you. My conclusion is this: apparently there is something within the human species that causes us to want to connect with others of our kind, unlike any other species on the planet. In fact, in our own vernacular here in this country, that makes us want to, in fact, go further and to give back, to help other people. Now, it's not true of everybody. It's not true of everybody, because coming up the tollway, you know where I'm going. Coming up the tollway for this meeting, I can just about tell you were the vast majority of people that we were competing with on the freeway, I can just about tell you that every single one of them were tuned in to an FM station that was all the same. You want to know what it is? It's WII-FM. That means what's in it for me. What's in it for me? That's where most people out there are coming from. They're tuned in to WII-FM.
I thought you were going to say conservative talk radio.
I wouldn't do that. And I have an example of WII-FM in my own life, as a matter of fact. Because almost none of this Rotary stuff for Marilyn and me almost never happened. When we first moved to Waxahachie, as I mentioned before, I didn't know I didn't know anything about Rotary. And I had been in Scouts as a kid, and I went all the way, as they say, Eagle and all that stuff. And I worked with my parents in church to help elderly people, and I'd gotten, but I didn't know that's what that Rotary was even about, helping other people. I just knew the name because when I married Marilyn, her dad was in Rotary, had been involved in Rotary clubs for years. And I've heard several of you this evening that had either relatives or friends or parents that were involved in Rotary, right? So that was my only reference. I didn't know anything about it. But when we got to Waxahachie, the realtor that helped us get settled there was a Rotarian, and he asked me, would you come join, not join the club, but would you come let me take you to lunch? And that was a lunch meeting then. And I said, well, I guess so. What's the deal? And he says, well, the mayor, the superintendent of the schools, the city manager, the bankers, the prominent attorneys in town, all the people that really are the leaders of town are in Rotary. I said, well, I guess that'd be good if I'm new to town. I could meet all those people. So I went, and after a few visits, I decided to join. Now, I got to explain to you, it's totally different than your experience here tonight. The Waxahachie Rotary Club was chartered in 1917. Out of the 33,000 clubs in the world, its charter number is 185. So this is an old club. And when I joined as a 41-year-old, I got to looking around, and I decided that quite a few of these old guys were charter members. Really. They were old. Seriously old. And as I tried to get to know, get myself involved in the club, I found that there were other things that seemed to be kind of strange to me. One of them was that back then, it's not that way anymore. If you all go down there, you'll find out. But back then, apparently there was an unspoken rule that you were supposed to sit in the same chair every week. They had tables for 4 chairs each, spread out all over the country club there for the dining room. And I remember getting my food one day. They had a buffet line, and I was going over to sit and meet one of these, a city manager or somebody. And the guy who sponsored me in Rotary grabbed my sleeve and says, "Oh, this is your chair." So I thought, I broke a rule. I didn't know. The next thing that happened was this room full of people, apparently you don't talk to the new guy. Because I was sitting there, and I was like wallpaper. And there's 3 old guys at my table, and they were acting like as the world turns for old men. Because they would have this conversation last week, and next week it just picked right up and kept going. It's serious, And I'm sitting there saying, what am I doing here? This is weird. And finally, after about 6 meetings, and I attended every one of them, I didn't skip. One of these fellows turned to me one day and he said,